Welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. This is a special production of the Society for Integrative Oncology. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern from now through Labor Day, we'll be shining the light on evidence-based mind-body practices that help us better manage stress and cultivate resilience and compassion. I'm really excited to be your host for this series. My name is Lee Leibel. I am the co-chair of the Yoga Special Interest Group for the Society for Integrative Oncology. I also have a mind-body practice at Columbia University Medical Center in New York City, where I work with cancer patients across the care continuum. So we have a really exciting program for you today. The title is Lifecycle of a Crisis, the Somatic Experience. And we'll learn today from our two guests that there are 5 stages that each of us, whether as individuals or as a society, must pass through as we look to resolve the crisis that we've entered into. This model that we're going to talk about today is the Hobson model, and our guests will talk more about that. So with no further ado, I want to welcome my guest and begin the introductions. Patricia Cusisto is a licensed clinical social worker psychotherapist. She graduated from Columbia University, and for the last 30 years, she's been working with trauma and in the field of social justice. Patricia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pardon me.
I'd like to introduce Millie Elia. Oh, and by the way, we've decided to use first names for this webinar since it's an informal conversation. So I'd like to introduce Millie Elia. Millie is a board-certified nurse practitioner who specializes in cancer care. She is also a yoga instructor, and she incorporates yoga into her clinical work. Millie is an avid health advocate, and she's also very active on the Yoga Special Interest Group for the Society for Integrative Oncology. So Millie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So I just want to give some quick information about what our 30 minutes together is going to look like today. So there are 2 parts of our program. This is the live roundtable conversation. It's meant to be interactive. So please share your questions through the chat box or the Q&A. And for the last 10 minutes, we've reserved time to answer your questions. The second part of this program is a pre-recorded experiential video that Millie did over the weekend. And it's really terrific. It's called Subtle Yoga. And it's a hybrid of yoga, Tai Chi, and synchronized breathing. That has been uploaded to the SIO YouTube channel. So please watch it either after this live conversation or later on at your convenience. So we're going to try something new today. I'm going to shine the light on my 2 guests, which means I am going to hide my video and go off screen. Millie will be the moderator, and I'm excited to see how this works. So what I will do is toss this to Patricia, and she's going to lead us in a grounding and centering practice to calm the thoughts so we can really tune in and listen to this important information they're going to share. So Patricia, oh, and then I'm going to come back at 20 minutes past to moderate all of your questions. So do keep typing them in. Patricia, it's all yours.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is, I came across a poem that I thought I'd like you to just kind of center in for a minute. I don't know where you have been, what time you got up this morning, and how much you've done already today up to this point. But I'm going to assume that if you're like anybody today, you've got a lot of We spent a lot of time doing a lot of things. So I'm going to just read this poem, ask you to just kind of close your eyes and breathe into this. And just allow your body for right now to come into present moment and to just settle into your chair or wherever you are. And allow yourself to empty of whatever thoughts, problems, worries, concerns you've had up to this moment in time. And let go of whatever you have to do when you leave here at 12:30 or 1 o'clock or whatever. Just allow yourself to listen to this poem and just see whatever images might come up for you as you listen. And the poem is called The Weighing, Weighighing, by Jane Hirschfield. So few grains of happiness measured against all the dark, and still the scales balance. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. And then it asks more, and we give it. So a few grains of happiness measured against all the dark, and still the scales balance. The world asks of us only the strength we have, and we give it. And then it asks more, and we give it. So breathing in to that awareness of the weighing poem. I thought it was probably the most profound way simply that we could all understand what we've been going through since COVID-19 came into our life. And I want to talk today about what I've learned to be the life cycle of a crisis. So, Millie, I think, can you give us the format and then we'll go into...
Thank you so much, Patricia, for that, that poem and the breathing that came with it. It was very grounding and appreciated at this moment. Today, we are going to be talking about the life cycle of a crisis. And for most of us, we're experiencing things in the same context, but we may be experiencing them just a little bit differently. So Patricia has been kind enough to provide us with a graph that we'll go through together, showing the different stages and where we are really at this moment in the life cycle of a crisis. We'll also be talking, or Patricia will be talking about how crisis can be actually perceived as an opportunity or give us an opportunity to look at our world a little bit differently. We'll be highlighting the importance of the pause in our actions and our feelings, and stopping for a moment to reflect on what it means to innercise versus exercise. And thank you, Patricia, again, so much for your time and providing this valuable information during these extremely stressful times. So please take it away.
Okay, this is going to be one of those experiences where we have about 20 minutes to cover about 20 years of information and knowledge. But what I'd like to do first is to show you all this graph, which is considered the life cycle of a crisis. And we're going to go through this a little bit so that you can understand where you've been and where you are. And this comes from, it's called transition theorists, all right? People have studied this. Those of you who know about Kubler-Ross's work on the 5 stages of grief and death and dying, This particular model is sort of a branching off from that by a man by the name of Barry Hobson and A.J. Adams and Jay Hayes. I believe they're British psychologists. And we do know that all crises have a actual structure that the human animal follows and will have to go through. It is the emotional things that we will go through. It's the physiological experiences that we'll go through. And there literally is this predictable form that no matter what crisis you're in, no matter what transition you're in, this will follow the format, okay? So it's nice to know. I think part of why I'm bringing this up is that there is a natural cycle that once I think we understand where we are, it sort of provides light at the end of the tunnel. So the first point that I want to be able to point out is if you think about where you were when COVID-19 first started, and I'm going to put it back for me around the beginning of March, those beginning months, if you look at this particular graph, you'll see that months, the week of the first week and the first month is all about experiencing a sense of numbness, a sense of disbelief. How could this be happening to us? Do we really have to wear masks? Do we really have to stay sheltered? All of that was beginning, all right? And we all went through that. Then what happens is somewhere around the second month, we begin to recognize that we're going to minimize the denial that we're experiencing, okay? You've all gone through this. It's like, okay, we're awake. This is what's been happening. This is around April or May, and things are beginning to, you're recognizing, this is the bottom line that we're looking at. We're not looking at the honeymoon phase. That we are beginning to really cope with this idea of beginning to adjust. This is phase 2, all right? As you notice, there's this idea that we're provisionally beginning to adjust what is happening. And I'm bringing this up right now because we're starting into phase 3. This is the 3rd to the 5th month, and you will notice here why I'm bringing it up to this idea of a somatic experience is, more than likely, you, for the last couple of weeks, and probably will stick around for a while, are in this phase of uncertainty, right? Feeling uncertain has a physiological experience to it. You say that you are uncertain, you're going to feel a particular way, right? And you're going to also feel this sense of a loss of confidence. You might feel confused right now. We have been hit with COVID, all right, in the beginning. Then along comes a second crisis in the form of the outrage and the physical violence that we saw in a result of the racial inequity that we are experiencing in this country. So there's a second crisis that comes along, right? With George Floyd being murdered, and we see that. Then we see the next piece that comes in, which is the opening of the economy, which is not working particularly well. So all of these things are having this a cumulative effect. So it's not just one crisis that we're going through. We have these series of crises that the human body is trying to organize around. We are now, go ahead.
I'm
Millie.
sorry, Patricia. You just brought up a really good point, and I'm gonna, if I can, use myself as an example. So with the COVID initial crisis, I saw clearly what was happening and where I, as a person, was falling into this. But then as the tragedy of George Floyd happened, I felt like I was suddenly sucked into another curve. So correct me if I'm wrong, but is what you're saying that we can simultaneously have the beginning or midpoint or end of one crisis and an overlapping beginning of another crisis? Is that
Yes.
possible?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And it's normal. I mean, I think that that's what we have to see, because life it isn't static and it isn't stagnant. So not only are you going through the social issues that are happening in the world at large, okay? So you've got all of the racial disparities that we're seeing at this point. You've got all the medical and physical disparities that are happening. You have, I'm sure you're experiencing it, you are involved with cancer and cancer patients. So there's all of, can you speak a little bit in terms of like, what is that like, that if you are a cancer patient or you're the family of somebody that is undergoing, watching a loved one go through treatment, there's yet another crisis that is happening?
Yes, I can. And thank you for that. And I know we only have about 5 minutes left, so I'll make this as abbreviated as I can. Because I'm working primarily in the community with cancer survivors and working now virtually, supporting them in their support groups and in their homes. One of the reoccurring themes is the isolation that quarantine has brought with it, and what that means to the patient and to the survivor. So, you know, in some cases that may mean a delay in their elective, in their procedures, in their treatments. That can mean an isolation at a time when they're feeling very vulnerable. So it's bringing with it this entire expanded experience besides the fear of COVID itself. And so I know we only have just a few minutes left, but can you, with the time we have left, tell us a little bit about how we can looking at this crisis, or the layers of crisis that we each have going on in our own lives, as an opportunity to come through. Yeah. Can you speak to that, yeah. Patricia?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Thank you. So I would ask each of you to think about, I really think that when we all think about what's gone on here, we have grief and we have gratitude. I think the thing that has happened for most of us is that, in spite of the fact that we have this outrageous crisis that is happening in transitions that we're going through, the amount of creativity that has come out of people's experiences and how they've made things work for themselves, there is a tremendous sense of growth that comes out of any kind of a crisis. When you think about that, in your own lives, it's not just now. You think of any crisis that you've ever gone through, the reality is that there's usually some kind of major growth that happens from it, all right? I think of it as about, you know, in terms of birthing, you know, labor was awful, but you know, what you come out with at the end is really quite extraordinary, all right? I think the same thing is true of this crisis. We will see tremendous changes that are hopefully going to happen in our, all the systems that we're dealing with at this point. So there is, if you look at the model, there is this, we begin to deal with it over an 8 or 9 month period, and then we are going to see a learning curve, okay? We do get up there. There's feeling good on the left side of the margin, and this arrow actually does, we do figure out a way. The human animal is amazingly resilient, all right? So we will figure out a way to get through this. We'll get our vaccines. Our job between now and then is to keep on inviting ourselves to pause, to go inward, to find those ways that help us deal somatically so our body can begin to calm. Go ahead.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm going to get ready to open the floor to questions, but what I wanted to very briefly recap with this incredibly valuable information is what I hear when you saying, when you describe this process, that it is a certainty in a environment, in a world now where everything is uncertain. And in that certainty that we will all go through the curves with the highs and the lows, it may look different because it's not cookie cutter to each of us, but we will all go through it as it is the human experience that has nothing to do with our socioeconomic status or, you know, the color of our skin, or this is something we can, in our own way, rely on, that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And thank you for that. This is a great time, a segue to invite Lee back and see if our audience has any questions we would love to answer. Welcome, Lee. Thank you.
That was so interesting, and I've got my eye on the chat box. No questions yet, so please continue the conversation, and I'll keep an eye on Q&A.
Absolutely. Please do continue the information that you were providing. So as we get through this crisis, and what can we hope for that would be the next stage that we can expect in terms of with this overlapping of crises? Like right now at this moment, for example, I have a third curve going on as we're trying to, in the midst of buying a new home, and I've got young kids, and so it seems like there's multiple curves. But what can I look towards as being the next predictable stage? Maybe you've said that, if you can just sort of highlight that again.
So if we think about the idea that, think of it this way, we've all gone through a period of crisis in our own lives, and we know that it takes time, and we know that there are things that the uncertainty, the confusion, and the depression that we will have to go through has a way of kind of inviting us to begin to look at our own resources, right? So, I'm getting
just so you know, I'm sorry, I'm giving you body language. We actually, my mistake, we actually do have some questions, and so I know you were in the middle of answering my questions, but I want to make sure that the attendees questions get asked.
Let's do I'll answer. Go ahead.
I didn't.
Yeah, Lee, if you click on Q&A.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
I'm ready. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
We have one question. Just want some more clarification of where this life cycle comes from. Who do you attribute it to? And it's Barry Hopson, B-A-R-R-I-E, Hopson, H-O-P-S-O-N. And do you have the name of this study in front of you? It's on my.
I don't have. I can tell you that it was done in 1976. Okay, Barry Hopson and Jay Adams and Jay Haley. Hayes is his name. And if you want more information about transition theory, that's really what we're talking about. And like I said, everybody has a slightly different model, but the life cycle of a crisis, whether or not it is Kubler-Ross, or whether or not it's Hopson, or whether or not it's a man by the name of Holmes who did a lot of work. Brown did a lot of work with crisis intervention and transition. There are many, many people who have worked with this idea of transition, understanding what the life cycle is, but they're all pretty predictable in terms of basically the life cycle of a crisis will lasts somewhere between 6 and 12 months. That's give or take, all right? It's not static, so everybody will go through the same kinds of emotional upheaval. They're pretty, they're pretty consistent. When you go through it, how you go through it is very much individualized based on your own personal history, your personality, your temperament, whatever. But you can pretty well make book on the fact that you are going to go through these emotional experiences from beginning to end, right?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay, so there are three questions that I really want to get to. One is, how can we help children go through this crisis, 6 to 11 years old?
Yeah, great. How do you help your children? So that's a great question. I mean, your children are going to go through the same thing that you go through, all right? And children don't have language. So how do you help them go through it? If you can use this model and ask kids to draw about the feeling of like, what was it when they first heard about this? Or you're gonna, as adults, I invite people to get very creative. You can sit down with your kids and you can write a poem about what it feels like to be stuck at home. You can draw with them to talk about what they're feeling like right now. You can create stories with them, inviting them to talk about what they're going through on an emotional level. If you can invite the conversation, they will probably be able to answer or inform you where they are and what they need. So how are they handling not seeing their friends? What is this like? I have an 8-year-old and a 11-year-old grandchildren, and I hear, I'm bored, I don't want to do this, why do we have to do anyway? But the more they can talk about it, the happier it is for them. And unfortunately, you have to hold it. You cannot make it better for them. You cannot make it better. That's the thing. You're going to live through this. You're going to make the most of it. You're going to have Friday night games or fun dinners, or eat ice cream first and then have your vegetables. I don't know, but you have to figure out some way to make it creative, because it stinks for everybody. It just stinks.
Thank you for that, Patricia. In the last 3 minutes, we have two very interesting questions to answer. One is, how can we ensure that what we experience as new growth from this crisis, or how can we experience new growth from this crisis as opposed to cracking under the extreme pressure of what's going on today in the world? That's question one. Question two, what about ongoing trauma? Is it possible that these things don't resolve within these 5 stages?
We need hours for this, right? Anyway, the first question was, repeat again.
So how do we ensure that we experience new growth from crisis as opposed to cracking under the extreme pressure?
Wow, these are such profound questions. How do you, what I would say is, stop. This is Thich Nhat Hanh's work. Stop often, walk slowly, stop often, and listen deeply. This is profound for all of us, and all I can invite yourself to pause, invite yourself to stop. Invite yourself into your body and go, I need to rest. I need to cry. I need to be cranky. I just need to go insize. Inner size, as Millie has in her exercise. It's not exercise. We're not going out. We have to go in, and we just have to hold the pain, right? It will change, but it's stop and pause and listen deeply. So that would be the answer to that first question. And the second question is, how do we what?
So what about ongoing trauma? Is
Yeah.
it possible that this doesn't resolve in
Yeah.
these 5 stages?
Yeah. Well, I'll be very simple with this. I was thinking about what went on in 1976 that Barry Hopton and Adams. I went back and I started to think about. That was right out of after we got through the Vietnam War, and why am I saying this? This is a war. We are in a war, and there's some people that survive the war. There's some people that die in the war. There's some people that recover and go through various kinds of treatments so that they can get through it and through the trauma. And there's some people that never get over the trauma, right? And that's the truth. You have lots and lots of people who don't get over their traumas. I invite people to go into doing trauma work, but we're not. There's going to be a lot of trauma that we all see at this point, because it's just what it is. It's profound go ahead. Somebody was going to.
That's a fantastic question. And I just want to put a little bit of my own input in this, and I could be off center, but one thing that I've learned from you, Patricia, is that this cycle can keep repeating itself. And having worked with people who have experienced trauma and PTSD, what I've learned from them is that not every day looks exactly the same.
Right.
Some days are worse, and some days are a little bit better. And so you still have those, it seems to me, and I don't want to overstep my bounds, but it seems to me that cycle continues. It just doesn't end.
Right.
Somebody who who has hit a wall with getting through the trauma and is still living that trauma, that they still have that cycle, the 5 stages, but maybe it just continues. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. And I think I want to be able to say, what can we do? And I know we probably have to stop. Stay in community. I mean, we do our work alone, but we heal in community. It's the isolation that makes the trauma consistently stick around. If I go into a group and I can talk about this stuff with people, or I know that somebody else is going through it, there's a sense of support. There's a sense of support. So that's the one thing that I would say that will help anybody to recognize that they're not holding the trauma by themselves. There are other people that are going through it.
That's why I want to thank Lee, take this moment to thank Lee, because the importance of what you're sharing, thank you, Lee, for giving us this platform, because all of us are experiencing this in our own way. And I know that I have felt profound relief in knowing that this was something that everyone was experiencing. It wasn't just me wondering why last week I felt that way, and this week I feel that, and now what's coming up. So yes, to your point, Patricia, community is where we need to hold on to each other. And thank you, Lee, for allowing us to share this information.
Yes, go to that.
Yeah, I just want to jump in, and to respect our attendees' time, we're going to wrap up now. Patricia, you're right. I mean, this is 20 years worth of information that we're trying to squeeze into 20 really quick minutes. I so appreciate your time. Patricia, I do know that you're offering a workshop if anybody's interested in taking a deeper dive into this. Would you like to say something quickly about it, or would...
Yeah, starting mid-July, I will be doing a 3-part series that will just really be a way for people to come together, learn a little bit more about the life cycle of the crisis, and also give an opportunity for people to voice where they are. So it's really called Where Are You Now? And it will basically deal with you being able to know where you are, but have the support that you need to know that you're not by yourself.
And how, if anyone is interested, how will they find you?
You can email me at patriciacusisto@gmail.com. You can get in touch with you, Lee, and we'll go through this.
Okay.
So that would be the way to do it.
So if anyone's interested, please send an email to info@integrativeonc.org, which is the SIO's informational address, and we'll make sure you get the info. Also, the graph that Patricia shared earlier, we will email it to each of you. We weren't able to actually upload it into the chat, so we'll follow up with an email. I want to thank our panelists, Millie and Patricia. Thank you so much. This is just a really, really wonderful presentation, and I think it really helps us to normalize and understand what we're going through. Thank the attendees, everyone who joined in today, and make sure to go to the SIO YouTube channel to practice Millie's wonderful
subtle yoga.
Subtle yoga.
Inner side yoga.
Your inner side.
A little time and breathing. So thank you, and everyone have a very lovely day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.